Yeah, we are live. What a day! What a day! Oh, okay. So I'm gonna stop the screen here, huh, Cheryl?
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to GMIHub Studio Talk. This is Gear Acquisition Part 2 or 2.0. Now, last time we talked about gear acquisition syndrome, we had three fabulous guys that are on there kind of talking about when to get the new gear and what to look for when you're getting new gear. But now, what if, just what if, you have gear, but you know, you want to figure out how to use what you already have, or maybe you're already ready to get rid of some of the gear you already have. Well, that's why we have three more fabulous guys here that are going to talk about this. We're going to discuss this. You know, what can you do with what you already have? And actually, at what point in time do you kind of just give up on what you have and get rid of or get rid of your gear or get new gear? With us, we have, I call it the ABC night. We have Adrian Sterling, who is an audio engineer extraordinaire. He's in, well, I can use all the technical terms, A1, A2, ComTech. He's got all of that going on, which I studied what that meant. You're going to be so proud of me.
Good. Congratulations.
It means he's been an audio engineer, a production audio tech. He's been a research and development technician as well. Does that sound right? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway.
Close.
Yeah. Well, I was looking it up. I was. Anyway, so there's Adrian. Adrian, so glad that you're able to be with us tonight.
And he also toured with, was it Hillsong Young and Free or Hillsong?
Hillsong United.
Hillsong United.
2 years ago? Like last year, 2019.
Yes.
It wasn't 2020. That's all we know.
It was not 2020.
So Adrian, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Bruce Nicol here. Bruce Nicol is, am I saying your name right, by the way?
Yeah, you are.
Awesome. Bruce Nicol is a backline technician. He's a guitar tech and a tour manager based out of here in Ontario. He's worked with such groups as Blue Rodeos, the Sheepdogs, and Finger 11, just to name a few. Bruce, so glad you're able to join us.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for extending the invite.
And of course, we have Colin Ward, who's with us. He's no stranger to GMIHub Online. Matter of fact, he's been on here before. You may remember him, and he is a wonderful member of the GMIHub team. He is here as a studio owner, home studio owner of Waters Land Studio, which was originally created just to record his own band's stuff. But then he opened up to help other artists as well. And he has such a heart to help other artists that may not even be familiar with being in the studio and just wanting to know the nuances related to that. So I'm so glad Colin's able to join us. Thank you so much for being here, Colin.
You're welcome.
It is a great night. You know, before we start talking to the guys, we have a little celebration to do.
We do.
Actually, there's two. The first one, I'm going to say it to you this way, this is, I believe, our 50th online show.
Yeah.
Yay! And last week, or from last week to this week, we had 103 subscribers. So that is a celebration.
We are celebrating. We are so happy. Thank you so much for all of you that have subscribed. But don't stop sending out the messages. We want you to go ahead and share this experience. And I can say like and subscribe if you've already subscribed. But send it to some other people who may not know about what GMIHub is doing, because we're actually here for you guys. We're actually here to share information and get people together to kind of share their knowledge about different topics related to tech, related to songwriting, related to music business. So go ahead and share and like and all of that wonderful stuff. But I don't want to take too much time. Let's get started.
Let's dive into this. I think I'm going to go a little different than what I think our first question was. I'm going to say, do any of you guys have gear acquisition syndrome, where you just want to buy gear all the time? Bruce does. Adrian does. Colin does.
All right.
I'm going to say no because my wife's sitting beside me.
Yeah.
Well,
My wife's upstairs, so I'm safe.
I think we need Gear Acquisition Anonymous.
Oh, the how many steps to get rid of that? So tonight we're supposed to be talking about not acquiring gear and how to make use of what we have. So, what is a piece of gear that we should have and we don't need to upgrade? I'm kind of diverting from some of the questions we started with, just to kind of move us in and start a conversation.
Kind of getting my head around the question. A piece of gear that you have that you shouldn't need to upgrade.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with ears, if you want to call your ears a piece of gear.
Anything that's got the word vintage in front of it.
Oh. So if I buy one of those new vintage Bluetooth record players off of Amazon for $59.99, I should hold on to that thing.
But if I may just interject with that statement, Colin made a great point. What's the right kind of vintage, right? Like, just because it says it's vintage doesn't mean it's going to be great.
Another thing that people throw in there, another buzzword, vintage or tube. There are an embarrassing amount of compressors, mic pre's that came onto the market, I would say probably mid 90s, that were all tube equipped devices. And the only thing tube about them is they would side chain the signal to run through the tube so you can see the tube glowing in the front of the piece of the gear, and the tube actually has nothing to do with anything in the signal flow of the whole piece of gear. But people want tube gear because it's vintage. So there's both of our buzzwords.
I agree with that statement. There was a pedal manufacturer that not that long ago was selling,
and we're not naming any names.
No, we're not going to name names. It wasn't Yamaha. It actually wasn't Yamaha, but they were saying that it was vintage and it had a 12AX7 preamp tube under a little piece of glass, and the tube was actually just being lit by an LED underneath it.
It didn't even turn on.
No. I mean, there was no way to get it out to service it, right? Like, you would literally have to like shatter the chassis of the instrument to get to this tube that was inside of a synthesizer, which doesn't make sense either. So here we are.
That's funny. Okay.
Let the buyer
I didn't expect to start like this.
I didn't even, but this is great. Okay, so when should somebody start thinking about upgrading their piece of gear or their equipment?
I'll start with another side of that. If you look around, any one of the things they say about studios is if it's working, don't upgrade it, especially if you're making money.
Okay,
that's the number one rule. Yeah, and because if you get something new and it doesn't work, you've lost your job, more or less. So.
It's funny because a lot of us do what we do because we fell in love with what we do, and part of that is falling in love with the gear and the gear acquiring syndrome and everything that goes with it, and the fancy blinking lights and everything. And it's easy for us to want new things just because we want them and we think they're cool and we don't need them. And sometimes that could be okay. That could be okay if that's the thing that you want that makes you happy. But once you start turning what you like to do into a business that's supposed to be profitable and make you money, you have to have some of those concerns that, is this new thing going to make this record sell more or make my day easier or save me time, thereby saving me money? And if it's not, then I don't need it. Is this thing going to get me clients? Depending on the type of production company I work at, I work at a production company that does a mixed bag of corporate and music and whatnot. But if you're at a corporate production company, and you have X amount of consoles that your technicians know how to use and they can go out there and get the job done, then why would you change those consoles unless it's going to somehow change your bottom line? Whereas if you're at a company where you have to meet riders for bands, this band's going to ask you for this piece of gear, this band's going to ask you for that piece of gear, whatnot. You have to get that piece of gear in order to attract that business, to be able to having this console that this band wants is going to allow me to rent my PA system and my microphones and my trucking and my labor and whatnot. So I have to buy that console. So there's a few things to think about there. Is this piece of gear going to get me something, or is it not going to get me something?
Yeah. I guess to kind of keep going along that thread, my opinion about it as far as when gear is necessary to be replaced, for me, it's usually like if the gear is not meeting the requirements to do the job properly. It's something that we fall into all the time in live touring, especially with bands and backline. And it's always sort of like you end up trying to do the most with the least almost at all times because of, like Adrian was saying, budget concerns and space and trucks. But at some point you also get to that end game where it's like, well, I can make this do what I need it to do if I do A through X. Or, I could buy this other piece of equipment that's going to do the same thing I need, but it's going to be fewer steps. Maybe if we think about like streamlining or, trying to prioritize the equipment in terms of what its intended purposes are.
And like, how good repair it is and how cost effective it is to keep that piece of gear in good repair. There could
and
be
how
a piece
easy
of
it is
gear
to
that,
repair.
well, yeah, how easy it is to repair, how cost efficient it is to repair it. Does it actually work? Does it reliably work? Am I going to put it in the truck in Toronto and take it out of the truck in Montreal and be able to do a show? Those are things to consider. If the answer is maybe, then it depends on how important that piece of gear is to your show being a success or not.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's kind of funny. It kind of circles into another question that Daryl is going to be asking us about vintage gear versus modern gear. There's currently a pretty big wave of amplifier modeling systems like Kemper or Fractal.
Oh yeah.
I work a lot with Kemper and I work a lot with Fractal, and I can tell you that I've never gone on a tour and not had at least two of them.
Yeah.
Because the Kemper is fantastic and so is the Fractal, but it's like trying to get someone to fix a VCR versus like if you had like a Fender Twin or a Bassman like Colin was talking about. Okay, you've got fewer paths of resistance as far as why does this not work?
Yeah.
So you're saying it's for you, it would be all about the ease of fixing on site, where you can pull out a soldering iron, whereas when the
Exactly.
modules, I just got to replace the whole unit, and hopefully that spare has not already been used, and then where do I go rent the next one that I have?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to like, the older style tube amplifiers, for example, like you have preamp tubes, you have power tubes, and you have input and output transformers, and then you've got a whole bunch of diodes and capacitors on a circuit board. Well, if a capacitor blows up, you can find it because it'll be blown up, or if, you're having a problem with the preamp tube, well, yeah, that's the one that's not glowing red, where, like you can take some of like a Kemper and you can plug it in and turn it on and it'll just not work. And that just, aside from reattaching ribbon cables and dismantling the entire unit, it's not very easy to service on the fly.
Okay, let's leave service aside here for a second. Bruce, you're I'll call it the instrumentalist. Adrian's the live PA. Colin's the studio. Is there a big difference between these multifunction digital units all in one versus the Princeton 212? Go ahead.
In my opinion, I'll state that nice and clearly.
Yep.
In my opinion, there is no mathematical equation that can fully realize and describe to your ears every interval between the frequencies.
Okay.
That's personal. I mean, they're really, really close.
Okay.
On the other side of the coin, if I set up a Kemper, for example, and put on a Princeton 12 patch and ran it down the first channel, and then I had a real Princeton 212 mic'd with an SM57 and put that in channel 2, and Adrian pumped it through a PA of, a couple 100,000 watts, if you're the audience, you're probably not going to notice the difference.
No.
That
Adrian,
would be
do you agree
my
with that?
personal opinion.
Adrian, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I agree. I agree in that modeling has becoming, and not even just guitar amps, but everything,
Right.
modeling mic pre's, modeling effects and consoles, etc., has become leaps and bounds better in the last decade or so than it was. Like the digitizing sound of modeling effects that we used to have that was so distinct, I feel like we don't have anymore. But I also agree with Bruce in that I feel like I would hear the difference, because what would happen is the difference would be in the player and the playing, because the player appreciating his piece of gear would actually would affect his performance, I find, in some situations. So if I take a guy who's used to this guitar amp screaming behind him and distorting the way it does, or put the same guy on the same patch that actually sounds the same if I ran a recorded track through both systems, the actual amplifier or the modeling, and I can not actually sonically tell a difference, but you put a player that knows what he's doing and what he's playing into, and he's used to one versus the other. We have to understand that a lot of what we do comes down to the performer and how the performer feels and how the performer can perform. So, will we be able to tell a difference, and would we probably have a better experience? Maybe. Is it because of the gear explicitly? Maybe not, but maybe because of the performer's experience that gives us a different performance.
Okay. So I'll go to the studio. Let's ask Colin. Do you tell the difference when you're in the studio between a guitar amp and a modeler?
I don't know. I don't have any modelers. I have a couple of 60s amps.
Okay.
Like I have a mid-60s Princeton and a mid-60s Gibson Skylark.
Okay.
And that's what we record. And we don't use my guitar player doesn't use pedals. I just run it through a single compressor. And that's it. And so I don't have any experience other than line 6, which I won't call them a modeler.
Okay.
They're getting better. Actually, the Helix is the most popular right now.
Yeah, I know, but it ain't the best.
Okay, so what you're saying is you can tell the difference with what most people are using versus the real deal then.
No, I can't, because I honestly don't know if my ears are that good, and I don't think I have the experience that these guys do professionally, listening to a whole bunch of different stuff. I'm pretty much familiar with what I have.
Can I throw something else at that?
Yeah.
It's not just the amplifier, the sound of the amplifier itself, but Bruce, you brought up, okay, I've got an amplifier on stage and I throw a 57 in front of it, or I've got this modeler and I'm taking an XLR out of the back of it. So the amplifier with the 57 in front of it is making a whole bunch of stage noise that's bleeding into other microphones that are on the stage that are adding to the sonic experience of that show. So, good or bad, that's debatable. The modeler will give you a cleaner sound of just that guitar down that channel, whereas that 57 in front of the amplifier is also going to be hearing the drummer hammering away at the crash cymbal, and that, whether you like it or not, is going to be in the mix, that crash cymbal in that guitar mic. That guitar amp is also going to be in the snare drum mic. So is this good or bad? I can't answer that. Is it different? Absolutely. Do I have an easier time mixing when there's a bunch of modelers on stage and the bass player goes direct, and then there's a keyboard, and then there's a drummer and like one singer, and like maybe the backup singer's on the other side of the stage, not close to the drummer? Hey, yeah, my mix sounds super clean and precise and everything's separated and it's great. Is that good? I don't know. Like, is it good when everything's all jumbled up together and you just hear, that sound of a rock band on stage? Maybe that's what you prefer. So different, absolutely, I would say.
I think Adrian's correct, and to add to that, I think there's room for both. Certain applications excel for certain things. So I work with pop groups where we have mountains and mountains of digital equipment, and then we work for more traditional rock bands where you've got walls of Marshalls behind you, and there's, like he said, there's room for both. It's just beauty is in the ear of the beholder, in this particular instance.
I don't want to interrupt it too much, but I will say this. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We hope that you like and subscribe and check us out on all our other social medias as well. If you want to check our website, we're at gmihub.ca. And we are now going to go back to the conversation.
I'm going to continue down the selection of the gear, and I'm just going to go back to one of the most important pieces of gear that most musicians will need and are always arguing about when to upgrade is the microphone. When should they upgrade to a different microphone, whether it's better or a different color or a tone? At what point should they be upgrading their microphone?
Yeah, a lot of times you're getting something different. You're not necessarily getting something better, because I have 3 or 4 vocal mics, and I'll put the singer up and they can choose which one they like, and they all pick a different one. But my go-tos are, I've got an SM7, which, Thriller and Michael Jackson, and a couple of AT 2020s, which is Billie Eilish and Ocean Eyes. So I figure I've got two pieces of equipment that have worked on hit songs, and nobody sits around and saying, well, you didn't use a U47 on that, so it's not any good. I've looked around, and if you remember, I sent the question in when the microphone people were here for Studio Talk. Same question, and they said, well, what do you got an SM7? What are you worried about?
Right.
He said you could get something different. You're not going to get anything any better. So, and that's sort of how I fought my G.A.S acquisition. And it's as Bruce and Mike were saying, I can go out and buy this stuff. Is it going to make it sound any better? Make me any better at mixing? Probably not. The problem is me learning how to use what I have. So if I get something that gives a good result, I'm just going to try and keep building on that good result. Because I can tell a bad vocal mic over, because I got them, over a good one.
Okay, so but when do you choose between your, because you said you have a bad vocal microphone, or somebody walks in with their microphone, which is $1,000 or $2,000, versus your SM7, which is probably, I think, $500-600.
Yeah, it's over $7 now, I think.
Wow, they've gone up. But
yeah, it's the dollar.
Yeah. At what point do you go, is that microphone better or is it not better? What's the criteria?
It's the person. It's the best compliment I had about the SM7. The first time I used it, the singer sang her first take, turned around and said, "That sounds like I hear it in my head." And I'm like, okay, because that meant we had captured what she wanted to have captured.
Okay.
And our guitar player, I don't use that with him. I use a 2035, which is sort of a goosed up 2020, because he's got a gritty voice and it smooths it out for him. Okay. So it's basically the vocal.
Adrian and Bruce, at what point should they, touring or in the studio or whatever else, because I know you guys have dealt with a little bit of that, at what point do they upgrade their microphone or the microphones?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to jump directly in the pool here, it kind of depends on what you're starting with. Like you can say, well, when do I upgrade? Well, what do you have right now? There's definitely a pretty big gap between, what you would consider to be like the prosumer version, or, something you would buy at like a Best Buy or something, versus, like a Sennheiser or an SM57 from Shure or a Beta or whatever, right? Like you need to at least get to a level of product where it's going to be reliable day in, day out. And microphones especially, it's so hard because I can sing into a $3,000 microphone and it's still going to sound terrible. I can sing into a $200 microphone and it's still going to sound terrible.
Just as terrible or worse terrible?
Well, again, that's in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, when I look at something like microphones, I always consider sort of, I'm thinking more about, how is it made? What kind of longevity am I going to get out of it? If I scream into it for 30 minutes, is the diaphragm inside going to get soaked and stop working? Things like that, versus, well, this is, Celine Dion sings into a $5,000 Sennheiser microphone. She sounds just as good singing into a $113 Sennheiser microphone.
Well, she sings into a $5,000 microphone going into a $10,000 receiver when it needs to be wireless.
Yes.
But if you watch her show, for the majority of her show, she's on an SM58 and it has a wire, and there's a guy paging it, and there's like a 100 by 60 foot stage that wire has to get paged around. And
that's a great example.
And when she's doing something that needs to be wireless, and you know what? So I do a lot of wireless work.
As do I, and I hate wireless.
I have a love-hate relationship with wireless. I sort of well, that's a whole other story. But for like some award shows, I do the CSAs. I do some sports stuff in the States as well, and whatnot. And what I will tell you is that the reason she prefers that SM58, into a mic-free, into an SSL console, is because it sounds better than the $5,000 Neumann capsule, Sennheiser mic with a Neumann capsule on it going into a $10,000 receiver. And the reason for all of that is like the actual wireless transmission itself. You're spending a lot of money to try to make to try to transmit that wireless signal with as few artifacts as you can and whatnot. And she has not found a device that gets across what she wants to get across better than a 58 plugged into a mic free.
Yeah,
so that's what it is.
If you look, for example, at like the G3 series that Sennheiser had out a few years back, like there's literally a menu option for cable emulation. Right? Like you're trying to get a digital signal to sound like an analog signal. And that's like a big part of it, right? Which is like a complete waste.
To get back to what Adrian was talking about, I've seen this myself. Paul Beloche walks in, goes up on the stage, looks around and says, anybody got a 58?
Yeah.
Because that's all he'll use. Doesn't matter what's on the stage. He doesn't even try it. He just turns around and says, you got a 58? Then off they go.
Well, I mean, there's a reason you see them everywhere.
Oh yeah,
and
there's a reason I got a bunch in my back room. It's all
there's a reason everybody does. Yeah. And I mean, that's what I'm talking.
I do not have a 58.
I'm talking into one right now. Yeah, I think when it comes to microphone though, to be quite honest, okay, great. We talked about Celine, but at the same time, it really depends. Colin touched on this as to like the person and what they prefer, because like, again, I'm going to come back to performance. Like, the performer has to feel comfortable with what they're hearing back. They have to like it. But then at the same time, Colin, you might experience a vocalist in the vocal booth of your studio, and it's a space that's treated and whatnot. But you also have to think environment. You also have to think what's going on around it. are you Nora Jones with a piano and have a lot of breath in your voice that is part of the performance that you want to get across, and that Neumann mic, that 105 that's in front of you, is also picking up part of the piano, and there's not like a whole bunch of stage noise? Or are you Metallica? If you're Metallica, then putting a 105 in front of a vocal is probably the worst thing you could ever do, because that's just going to turn into like overhead number 6.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was
Sorry,
on a tour with a very loud band when we actually had a Neumann on lead vocal, and you could hear the drummer breathing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Exactly. But so, I mean, if you're Nora Jones with a piano, then you want that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what are you trying to do? Like, I don't want to buy this microphone because it's $1,000. I don't want to buy this microphone because it's $200. I don't want to buy this microphone because it's $10,000. I want to buy this microphone because it gets across what I'm trying to do in the environment that I'm in.
Yeah.
How great was gain before feedback with that Neumann with that Rock Band?
Yeah.
Like, that couldn't have been fun.
No,
But
it wasn't great.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've in my efforts to be a studio guy, I've gone through seminars of editing the pops and the breaths and all that stuff out of the vocal track. And then I went and had a good listen to a Barbara Streisand, a vintage, and it like was always there.
Yeah.
Nothing had been touched. It was just what she
people
laid
breathe.
down. And it sounded great. Well, of course it was Barbara, but still,
Yeah.
it didn't sound, I probably only noticed because I was looking for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, those things, when we talk about, older recordings, those things are what give those songs their character.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
For a while, there was the isolated vocal track from Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and you can hear Marvin Gaye stomping his foot in the background when Tammy Terrell's singing her part. Or if you listen, for example, to a Steve Miller Band, you can hear that compressor sucking that vocal in and out on Jet Airliner. And those are things that give those songs the character that we love. So much time ends up getting spent on getting rid of the things that make songs unique in their own special way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. We've had a couple of viewer questions come into us. So I'm going to ask you a low budget, low end piece of gear that surprised you, that you would recommend for people to check out if they're having some gas issues. And it's like, okay, you know what? You got some gas. Here's a piece of low end, low budget gear that can actually maybe help out somewhere.
Well, we talked about 58s. Can't have enough of those.
Yeah.
Like, literally cannot have enough. Because, I mean, how, like, are you going to record an ensemble in your space? Are you going, like, somebody else is always going to need a microphone. They're $100. Like, it's, they'll last forever. You can use them as a hammer. Go buy a 58.
Don't use it as a hammer, though.
But you could.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and the AT 2020 is only 100.5.
Yeah, I used to have a couple of those, actually.
Yeah, I use it for drum overheads and all kinds of stuff.
But
I think the AT 2020 would be less agreeable to being used as a hammer, though.
Yeah, yes. I would agree with that.
On the instrument side, Bruce, what's something that's just astonished you? Going, I like this piece of gear. It makes my life so much easier to help these instrumentalists do whatever it is, or this great little instrument.
So we're talking about a full piece of gear or an addition to something, or
Sure.
well,
Something that just blew you away.
Something that blew me away. Well, a lot of things blow me away. I'm pretty open-minded. When you're talking about maybe upgrading an existing instrument like a guitar, you'd be surprised what a really good set of tuning pegs can do for you. A lot of guys will be like, oh, this guitar just doesn't stay in tune and it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that. It's like, that's like first culprit, the nut, and then good set of tuning pegs,
Yeah,
set of Cluesons or Sprizzels or Grovers, $100.
Yeah, I had
bad guitars sound great.
on my acoustic. I had all the plastic pegs and everything changed over to Tusk because I couldn't afford ivory.
Yep.
But Tusk, it sounded like night and day when you were done.
Yeah. The GraphTech stuff is awesome, and it's made in Canada.
Oh yeah.
Little extra plug. There's actually we're very fortunate. We've got a lot of really good gear manufacturers in this country. GraphTech being one, obviously Radial Engineering in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I might get flamed for saying it, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Like Yorkville Sound Trainer, they make a lot of really quality products that aren't expensive.
Yeah.
And you really can't kill, like, most Yorkville stuff cannot be destroyed.
Yeah, our church is running an old Yorkville built-in amp and everything in the vocals and for the church service, and there's no reason to change it because there is no problem with the sound. Everything is legible, So it's getting. I think they finally had to get it repaired after 12 years or something, because one channel went out, but.
Okay, another question from the viewers. What piece of gear can't you do without? Besides the SM58.
Oh man, this list is going to be longer.
Okay, keep it under $200 because we're trying not to spend money.
That's a problem.
Adrian, I know it's the Leatherman, and same with you, Bruce, but we won't.
A good cheap multi-tool, always comes in handy. I would say if you're a stringed instrument player, like a guitar player or a bass player, a good tuner.
Yeah.
I would say for an. Oh, sorry, go on.
Nope, go ahead.
I'd say for an audio tech, this probably encroaches on a little bit over $200, but if you're a live audio tech, whether you're working in broadcast or productions or sports, whatever, any discipline, corporate, you need a Whirlwind cue box. You absolutely need to have one if you're starting out. If you're just learning your chops, getting to your first gigs, like whatever. This thing, I have one. I have devices that do what it does better than it does, but it's still the thing to have. You're almost expected to have one. If you're an audio assist, somebody's just going to tell you, put your cue box on this thing, listen to it, listen to this line, send me a tone. Like, you want to be an audio tech, you have a cue box in your box. Like, you just have one.
Colin, some piece of.
Sorry, I was looking up Whirlwind cue box on the internet there. That one I hadn't heard of. Yes, okay. You asked me a question.
So what was a piece of gear, I'll call it $200 or less, and other than an SM58 that you can't live without?
Well, I think Bruce hit the nail on the head. Is it's so obvious is a good tuner.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else under $200.
Okay, Bruce, since we keep throwing back to the guitars and the stringed instruments with tuners, what about for drums?
For drums,
I know you tech drums as well a little bit.
A little bit. Something you could obviously a good drum key, a good multi-tool.
What about the tune bots? Have you used those?
I haven't. There's all kinds of different weird apps and stuff like that. There's one the Tama makes a drum tuning device that's really great. I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen that one used frequently as well. But I mean, as far as tuning drums, there's really no, as far as I can say, there's really no replacement for just a good set of ears.
Okay.
And unfortunately, experience, and tuning drums is also, I know the two audio guys are going to kill me over this. It's also very subjective. Do you want a very dry, like Mick Fleetwood, late 70s kind of sound? Or do you want like a John Bonham, very open sound? I've worked with drummers that both tune to specific pitches. And I've worked with guys that are just like, make this thing as dead as possible so I can hit it as hard as I can. So,
I won't argue with you. I know you're expecting me to as an audio guy. But I won't argue with you, but I will say that my younger self would have argued with you.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm almost going to feel like a broken record here, but I'm going to say it over and over and over and over. But like, it's not about the gear, it's about the performance. And if that's the feel of the song, like if that like thuddy snare drum with loose snares and it's low and whatever is the sound. Like I come from doing like a lot of I started doing like a lot of gospel, and then I did like a lot of funk and R&B and stuff like that. And like at one time, like in the 90s, it was all about that tight piccolo and like whatever, and I wanted every snare drum to sound like that. Like I just, anything I could do. I'm behind a console and I'm like, this thing doesn't sound like that, let me get it. Like I can't get it to sound like that. And I'm just working against like what the artist is trying to get across. And it's something that I realized over the years that like, no, there's not one sound. You know what? And we go back to the ears and listening again. It's not just listening in the moment or listening at that gig or listening to something in your headphones and trying to mix it. You need to be listening all the time, because there is so much music out there and there is so much to listen to. And if you're not familiar with the direction that your artist is going in, there's no way you can help them, because again, you're an audio technician, you're in a service industry, you're helping your artist get across what they are trying to get across. And if you are not even familiar with that, how are you supposed to help them do it? So sorry, just to jump in there, because I know you're saying, oh, this guy's an audio guy, he's going to tell me the snare, the drum should be tuned this way, but the drums need to be tuned the way that the drummer wants them to be tuned.
I agree.
I'm going to jump in this about the guy playing. I did a gig a few years ago. They were sharing the drum kits, and I won't say the main band, but the bigger band said, we'll use whatever kit's coming in. We're easygoing. They didn't check with the other band who was coming in with the kit. The first band came in. They did their sound check. They loved the way it sounded and played and felt. They left. This guy walks in, looks at the drum kit and goes, Daryl, you have a sixth sense of humor. Like, what is up with this drum kit? I said, that's the kit that they're using. He goes, is this like a kid's band? I go, yes. He goes, I wish I would have known, because a Sears drum kit does not count for a kit that should be on the stage. And he actually made it sound pretty good. Here he is in front of 400 or 500 people playing the Sears drum kit with the original plastic heads and the pedal. But it sounded all right. Now, it didn't sound like a true drum kit, but it sounded better than what it originally was. So yes, the person and the player make a big difference.
I do feel bad for that drummer though.
Oh, he had a good laugh after. Like he had a great attitude towards me, because he actually did see that it was a bunch of kids who were using it. But he did say, I will learn from now to ask what the kit is. I think Cheryl had something to say.
I just wanted to say, wow, I'm actually watching a little bit of the chat here, and I just want to shout out to our viewers. You guys are absolutely awesome. I'm loving this conversation that's going on here. A shout out to Henry. Thank you so much for joining in with us. A shout out to Victor. You guys are just awesome. I love this conversation. There's another conversation happening among here. And they have a question too about electro voice microphones, which I'm going to let you answer in a few minutes, guys. But for anybody else that's joining us, we so appreciate you joining us. You are right now with GMIHub Online. This is the studio talk session where we are talking about G.A.S. Gear Acquisition Syndrome 2.0, which is basically, believe it or not, talking about when can we, or doing with what we have, working with what we've already got, and knowing when really it is a time to actually acquire new gear. And we have with us Adrian, audio engineer. See, I'm going to remember this A and A. Okay. Adrian, the audio engineer. Bruce, the backline.
Bruce, B&B.
BB. Backline. Okay, what's C for Colin?
Colin studio, buddy. Colin, our studio guy, and they're all talking together about this. But I'm so thrilled that you guys are talking behind here. I mean, Henry's enjoying his meal with us. I'm so happy you're doing that. I should have asked these guys to bring their coffee, tea, and snacks too, because that's what it is. It's like a conversation around the table. If you have the opportunity, share this experience with somebody else that may not know about GMIHub Online, but would enjoy hearing this conversation. And remember, if you're not a subscriber, remember to like and subscribe. If you want to know more about GMIHub, definitely go and visit our website, gmihub.ca. And we are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so you can check us out there too, GMIHub. So I'm not going to steal too much time, but I am curious. I'm with Henry on this question. Have you, any of you, have experience with electro voice microphones?
The RE20. Sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
I do, although I'm not an audio engineer. A band I worked with had an endorsement from EV. They were a multi-million-dollar, multi-platinum artist, worldwide, and they actually had an endorsement from EV for microphones, and they were extremely durable on the road. I remember we had the PL33 and the Cobalt and the Raven are the only ones I remember off the top of my head. One that was very similar to the
Cardinal.
Yep.
Yeah, the Cardinal had that one. And they're great mics. But again, with any manufacturer, you're going to have, a lower tier and then like an upper tier.
Yep.
And, again, it's generally for me always tends to be more about, durability and how long they're going to last versus tonal quality. I'm sure the two audio guys can probably talk more about that.
The first thing that came to my mind is I have a 664 back in the cupboard.
Okay.
Yep.
Which
So
is, if I'm not, it's what Jagger used to use. The Stones use 664s.
Is that a cardioid condenser? Or
That's a dynamic.
Dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got the cable, but I don't even know if it works anymore.
I'll test it out for you, Colin.
Okay.
Adrian, I'm sure you've used a few of the EV microphones because they've got some great old vintage microphones.
Well, you mentioned the RE20.
Yeah.
And they're still those are great for I use those a lot, surprisingly. Voiceover booths, voiceover works, and Voice of God at award shows, things like that. Full-bodied microphone, very directional, very nice. But other than that, I would say I don't have that much experience with EV microphones, but the ND series, the
Tom
I think they're like exactly, yeah. Oh man, so I remember a bunch of those being in the back of a mic closet at a place I worked at one point, and I just they're just always kind of sitting there, and I just never I never thought anything of them. And an engineer I really expect told me, hey, try those things out, and they are amazing. They're right up there with probably one of my favorite Tom mics. The problem in live work, and especially in a lot of television work, is smaller is better. Up to me, I'd put a whole bunch of 421s on the Toms. You know what I mean? And top and bottom, and let's go. And but the camera doesn't want to see all that. They'd rather see the drum. So a lot of times smaller is better. There's a lot of clip-on options and stuff like that. But yeah, that ND series drum mic from EV, great microphone. RE20, great microphone. Electric Voice, obviously a great long-standing company. To be honest, in the live world, the majority of what I see rider-based is Shure and Sennheiser, and that's what you'll see in a bunch of rental houses. So because of that, that's what I have the most experience with.
So we're going to go back to this studio discussion here a wee bit. So Colin, what do you recommend for somebody to start off in their studio, what's the bare minimum to get a good sound?
Yeah, I've been asked this before, and it's usually the singer-songwriter types that just want to get something going. I use Focusrite myself here, and Focusrite I think is a good entry level. The other common entry level is PreSonus. I think those are about the best two names. PreSonus you get a bit more for your money than you do with Focusrite, but I've had a friend of mine, he switched from PreSonus to Focusrite. He said he couldn't believe the difference. He said it was just a whole new world. So like a Focusrite Scarlett, it's $239. That's 2-channel, and you get Pro Tools free. And the PreSonus entry level is a 2496 Audio Box i2, and that's $229. But with that, you get Studio One Artist, which is sort of the bottom end of the Studio One from PreSonus, which is a lot better than getting something from Pro Tools.
So you don't like Pro Tools?
Oh no, I like Pro Tools, but I wouldn't like the Pro Tools Free is built to be worked into the cloud.
Oh, okay.
And I prefer having my stuff on my drives in my house.
Okay. I think we're going to do a whole big thing on the DAWs in another month or so. So we're looking into that. So good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue on. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Other than that, I'd recommend a 58 or an AT2020 or even a 57 can be a vocal mic. You can be doing just about any rappers like them. And speakers, and headphones. What I just say, get your favorite music that you like listening to. Go get it on a stick and go down to Long and McQuaid and listen to some speakers and some headphones.
Okay.
Because it's all personal. Whatever you buy, in 3 months, it'll be the normal sound to you.
Okay. So you're saying about $1,000, you've got an entry level studio.
No, five, 600, I think. Yeah. Yeah. It really.
Well, I mean, you talked about an interface and microphone stuff like that. I don't think you mentioned a computer though.
Oh, that's true. That's a problem.
That's kind of an assumption, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I'm an Apple guy, so I would just get a MacBook Pro or something, but I don't know what to say about that. I just assumed most people had a computer and they just wanted to record music. So, but you're right.
No. I mean, I didn't mean to step on you, but like just
no. That's
just giving the beginner person like the cost of what it takes to actually get their voice down onto a hard drive and hear it back.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. Because if you want to go Mac, the entry level is the Mac Mini, and it would not even take a deep breath to handle a 2-channel interface.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you'd have to get a keyboard and a mouse and a screen to go with that, and you're ready to go. I like Mac. I find it more stable.
I was going to say, as someone who at one point in time was a computer programmer, I can tell you that for recording purposes, and I think everybody pretty much thinks that Mac is much, much, much easier to work on.
Yeah.
I've recently had to switch back to Windows, and it's a nightmare.
I know some people that run some pretty heavy studios on Windows platforms. I can't say I'm one of them. I'm talking into a MacBook Pro right now, but
yeah. I'm not saying it's impossible. You definitely have to be much more savvy with the computer if you're going to run Windows, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think you're right, and it's funny, as you said, as a computer programmer, like my formal training, I went to I did database programming and did a whole bunch of Microsoft certs and SQL and Visual Basic, and that's kind of how I got my start in technology.
Yeah.
Like early 2000s and
97 to 2001, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so,
I did Go Unix on Pro 5 data server.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So okay, we're talking. Yeah. But again, I'm talking into I'm a Microsoft certified professional talking into a MacBook Pro.
There's the money, there's the business side. But for the singer-songwriter going, I got to buy the microphone to make a difference. Should they be looking at a microphone? Should they be looking at their preamp? Should they be looking at their speakers? Do they need to look at them all both? Because can they tell the difference without upgrading all of it?
Here's something I want to talk about, and I just want to throw out there, just because, like, I know we're talking in a church-based circle, and I just want to throw this out there before we even get to that thing. But whose money is it? Like, when you're trying to decide to upgrade, like, whose money are you spending? Are you spending your money, or are you spending your church organization's money? And that's something that makes the decision a little bit more complicated, because if I need a new microphone for my lead vocalist in my church, then that money is also being taken away from the ministry that goes and feeds the poor on Friday mornings, or whatever, closes the soup kitchen or whatever, because we need a new microphone or we need a new in-ear monitor or anything like that. So, like, I think a lot of us, as we said in the beginning of this, you know, we love new gear. I love opening things. I love peeling the plastic off of stuff and putting it out and hearing the difference, if it makes a difference, if it doesn't make a difference. I love all those things. And a lot of us can get caught up in that stuff. But I think a big part of, we're trying to figure out how to make that decision. And the decision isn't only the gear itself or whether the gear makes a difference, but the decision is, like, where is this money best spent in the overall ministry of the church?
Yeah.
It's just something that I wanted to throw out there.
That is a great question. And I'll tag on something. Oh, somebody else has something to add to that?
I was going to say in the studio, the way I look at it is, first, you need a great song. Second, you need a great performance. And third is the equipment. And it's the other two will carry it. If you don't have great equipment, if you got a great song and a great performance, it'll carry it. Like, how many, like Eilish came out of the bedroom. And you can name a number of people that had hit albums that were done in the bedroom. So
Okay.
that's really what you got to work for me.
And I'll put this little statement on this. And if you buy the new gear, how long will it take you to get competent in the gear?
You're slow like me. It's years.
Okay, I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up.
Well, actually, there is one more question, if I can ask. What advice would you give to our listeners and viewers when it comes to deciding on whether or not to acquire equipment? What piece of advice would you give them?
No experience, but lots of opinions. There is no red button out there that'll make it perfect. It's you knowing how to use what you've got. Go take a course.
School of YouTube.
Yeah. That'll. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. There was no GMI and YouTube and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many resources out there now where people can, they can see how to build things. They can see how to fix things. They can see how to record things. They can see different mic techniques, how to use a plugin, how to use a console, how to use, a lot of that, like, we probably didn't have when we were learning how to do what we do. But I mean, there's just so much of that, watch it all, listen to it all. Take your gear and listen to it, like, play with it, turn every knob, don't just, like, not let a mic distort it and know what that distortion sounds like. Know what everything sounds like in that piece of gear before you're thinking about ditching it for another piece of gear. There's definitely pieces of gear in my past that I kind of wish I still had because they did that thing that I don't have anymore.
If I can attempt to sound like an adult for once in my life, I guess maybe, a big piece would be really weighing the need versus want. Like, do I really, really need this? Do I need to spend $3,000 on a guitar, or do I only need to spend like $500? Like, for real.
Right.
You know, there comes a point, I think, for every player where, yeah, you do have to step a little further up the flagpole as far as maybe quality. But, you know, like we were talking earlier before, Daryl, about your Yamaha acoustic there in the back. Like, that's the best $180 acoustic you'll ever buy.
Yeah.
And it's a great example. You know, Yamaha is a great example of a company that makes affordable equipment that is extremely robust and lasts, right? But, you know, a competitor to Yamaha, you know, would be, you know, you could buy a Fender custom shop Telecaster for like $3,000, or you could buy a Yamaha, you know, Mike Stern model, which is similar to a Telecaster in many ways for much less. And it's still a great guitar. So, you know, looking at need versus want and really thinking about your budget and, you know, doing research and seeing what other players have to say at the end of the day. And both Adrian and Colin have touched on it, you know, like the music is in you, you know, it's in your hands, it's in your mouth, you know. Like I said, I sound the exact same on a $5,000 microphone as I do on a $300 microphone. That's because, you know, the part of me that is using the microphone, I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, guys, this has been absolutely
A gas.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
Were you waiting the whole episode to use that?
Yes.
Probably.
Writing the whole episode to use them.
Well, it was absolutely awesome for you guys to join us. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, Adrian, Bruce, and Colin. I think this has been an awesome conversation. For those of you who have joined us on the chat, you are absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for participating with us. And we hope you come back again and participate with us and share,
Like and
the
subscribe.
link. Yes, absolutely.
And don't forget the compilation Christmas album.
That's right. We are actually doing another Christmas compilation CD. What does that mean? Simply this. You need to write songs. You need to send it to us so we can put it on an album and publicize it. Simple as that. Need more information? Go to our website, gmihub.ca/Christmas project, and you'll get all the details there. Like I said before, we are also on we're here on YouTube, but we're also on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. So feel free to keep up with us, like and subscribe on all those platforms as well. We also have a newsletter that we send out, which I know a lot of companies do newsletters, but what's special about this one is that we have a section called Members Happening, which simply means this. You send us your email, you're a member. You're doing anything that's related to your music industry or tech industry that you'd like us to know about, we'll put it in the newsletter, and guess what? Everyone's going to know about it that's in the community. I think it's just a way that we want to help encourage unity, community, mentorship, and talent growth. So feel free to check that out. Again, gmihub.ca. Check us out on all the social medias and come back to us next week when we have, actually it's ladies night next week.
But the guys can still watch.
The guys can definitely still watch. We have Christian guitar girls that are coming on board. We have Chelsea Amber, who I might try and get her to ask a few questions too. We have Chelsea Amber, we have Amy Savine, Alana Smith, and Jaylene Johnson. They're all going to join us and talk to us about songwriting with their guitars. It's going to be an awesome episode, so I hope you tune in. And 2 weeks from now, I don't want to forget this. If you like drums, which I'm sure some of you do, you will may have heard of Larnell Lewis, who is the drummer for Snarky Puppy,
That just won a Grammy
award, and we want to congratulate Snarky Puppy for that. But Larnell is going to be on 2 weeks away on March the 29th, along with Tobin Buckwinkle, I think I'm saying his name right, from Flatfoot 56, and they're going to be talking about living their faith. And so it'll be awesome if you come and join us on there. But until then, we want to say thank you so much for being here tonight, and be back with us next week. God bless.
Bye.